Then the following night, the 11th of Av, I got to perform in Jerusalem at gorgeous synagogue called Kol HaNeshama. My friends Yossi and Susan, and of course my teacher for 20 years, Edna Wapner, who made the whole thing happen. She introduced me to Yossi and Susan, who have strong connections like she does to this synagogue. Absolutely loved spending time with them. The day that I arrived in Jerusalem, Father and God got together and decided to show me that on Facebook, one guy who had decided to give up his entire week in an actual theater at Edinburgh in the Edinburgh Fringe Festival to whomever would pass the application process this late in the game. I messaged him, I emailed him, many emails, but I was able to apply, and out of the 7 people who I think were able to apply, they picked me. The night before performed in Jerusalem, I got this little ding on my phone saying, you may have been admitted into the Edinburgh Fringe, but you have to pay now. And the last couple of months before I was planning my trip, I also was creating a nonprofit, which thank God went through probably about a week before my trip. The nonprofit is called Ether Arts. So I was able to create a GoFundMe through it, collected some money, thank God, which would be enough money just to take me around to the places that I needed to go to perform in the theaters that I had already rented. There's expenses for all of these things, but the Edinburgh price was gonna be too much for me. I mean, it was thousands of dollars. I also need to pay for my rent. I need to pay for Ubers. I need to pay for food. I need to pay for flyering. I need to pay for posters. The cost of Edinburgh itself, ginormous how expensive it is, even for a week. So when I performed on that Thursday night, when I was finished with the performance, people really liked it. The first time, I believe, that they had a program where very religious people were sitting next to not so religious or not religious at all, Jews and non-Jews, sitting in their synagogue. And at the end of the show, I sing this song, People Are Fascinating. And I said, put your arms around each other. This is a song about making peace within and amongst all people. And so people did. And they put their arms around each other, and people were crying, happy tears and sad tears and grieving over October 7th, but also October 6th, and how spread out and so distant and polarized the world feels, especially the world in Israel feels, this feeling of unity in the air. And it was really quite wonderful. And at the end of the show, I said, I have this nonprofit. None of you paid for your seats. So please, here's a bucket, throw some shekels, which is like, their currency. But also, if you wouldn't mind going online, and there's a link and you can contribute to my show. And lo and behold, this really, really sweet gentleman who was like screaming and clapping the whole night with applause. And he comes running up to me and he hands me a lot of shekels and says, I really want to support you. I would love to see your show on Broadway. And I said, well, I'm overwhelmed, and I'm so grateful for your donation. I'm supposed to be performing in Edinburgh this weekend if I can find the money, but I definitely need more than what we've raised. And for some reason, a few days earlier, my friend Dr. Ozzy challenged me to raise the amount of money. And lo and behold, I get home that night and it's midnight and I'm just checking my messages and I see an email come through. And it says, you have surpassed the amount you put on GoFundMe. And I start bawling. And I'm like, was this a family member? Was this like a good friend? It was that gentleman. And a bunch of other people had given so many donations that, but he was, one of the biggest ones. And I was so beyond myself. I can't believe what just happened. Because it was beyond myself. I could never have imagined that would have happened. I just kept praising God. I kept saying this one line over and over again. Ki le'olam chazdo. Ki le'olam chazdo. His loving kindness is endless. I couldn't stop praising God. I was so grateful and felt so much bigger than just little me. It was. The show sort of took on its own momentum. This morning was Friday, and I had exactly 8 hours from the time I woke up the next morning until Shabbat candlelighting to book my flight that would be leaving Israel right after Shabbat, because I don't fly on Shabbat, and then getting to Edinburgh the following day. And I had to be there by noon, and here's why. Once a year in Edinburgh, the Jewish community has a huge festival where they meet at synagogue and they get to have all of their Jewish acts in the Fringe, either written by, performed by, produced by, starring Jewish people in some way. And so a bunch of them had applied and they each got 5 minutes on stage. And I was hoping that not only would I get to schmooze with them and get to meet them so I could see what's there to see in the Fringe that might be appealing to me, but also maybe I could get on stage and just talk about my show for a couple minutes. I just wanted to be around Jewish people and eat kosher food. So I was invited to it by my beautiful friend Rachel, who was so happy that I'd be staying with her, and thank God no one else took my spot that she had offered me. I'd just be taking the last week. And I also needed a place to stay for the first 2 nights because she didn't have an opening until the second night that I was there. And so she had one friend who lived near the synagogue that was happy to have me, but I was going to have to pay for that. It was an Airbnb and this whole thing. It was a lot of calls. It was a lot of emails. I had to get approval for my poster. I had to make tickets. I'm sure all my I's were dotted and T's were crossed for the Edinburgh Fringe. I had to make sure that I could pay for it. I had to make sure that the money was in my account. And I mean, there were no direct flights to Edinburgh. So then I had to set up 2 flights Saturday night, one from Tel Aviv to Rhodes, which is Rhodes, Greece, and then from Rhodes to London. And then at 4 a.m, book a car because I didn't want to just rely on Ubers at 4 a.m. I wanted to make sure a car service was called. And it was going to be $700 to drive me from London to Edinburgh, 7.5 hour drive. And that is exactly what I did. Because had I taken the train, which only started at 8 a.m, and God knows if my flight would have been on time and if it would have even worked out, I would have been in the airport by myself in the freezing cold, because it was freezing back then, in London in the middle of the night from 4 to 8 without a place to sleep anyway. So I just thought, okay, I'm just gonna have to pay the extra money, get in the car, and hope and pray that my cab driver is nice and doesn't take advantage of me. And I'll pay the money. I'm in Durham. Sagir, he's driving me 7.5 hours from London to Edinburgh. And you know, the truth is, the direct flight that was flying on Shabbat, which I would never take, was exactly the same amount as the 2 flights plus the car service from British Airways. So I slept from London all the way to Edinburgh. My driver could not have been kinder. He was so sweet. Muslim. I spoke to every single Muslim cab driver that I had while I was in the UK. And you said Israel would questions about peace in the Middle East, and all of them were very pro-democracy. And even if they weren't pro-Israel, they were pro-humanity, and they wanted to get along. And I loved those conversations, and I cherished them. I get to Edinburgh, to my new friend's home, who had me in her Airbnb for 2 nights. Lovely woman. She had like 4 other guests staying in her. She literally lived in a castle. So I rented one of her rooms, and she gave me like a fruit and said, take a quick shower because you just got off 2 planes and a car ride and you probably need a shower, which I did. She was so gracious. And she said, we have exactly 5 minutes and then I will meet you in the car and I will take you to the Jewish Theater Festival. So that's exactly what I did. I had flyers from Jerusalem and London, not Edinburgh, because I just found out about getting into the Edinburgh Festival right before Shabbat. And now it was Sunday afternoon and I didn't have a chance to go to the place to get my unapproved flyers. Yeah, because it still hadn't been approved. But I knew that I could put stuff on my website. I just didn't have a link yet for tickets. But I'm handing out my bad flyers with the bad information on it, but telling them, just look me up and go to my website and get on my mailing list. And can you email me and I'll send you tickets to my Edinburgh show, which starts tomorrow night and runs for 6 nights, except for Shabbat, because I'm not doing Shabbat. It was exhausting, but people were so gracious, and thank God the rabbis were so kind. They let me go on stage and talk about my show for 2 whole minutes. And I did. And I was funny. And I was also serious. And I also said, it was the monologue of my life. I was able to get so much information packed into 2 minutes. And I was able to say, I just got off a plane from Israel. And people went, yay! And it was such a great feeling. And then I went up to every person that took a flyer from me with the bad information on it. And I got their WhatsApp and I messaged them once I had my link. Went into the Fringe area. I was able to get to the place that does the flyers and the posters, make some posters, threw them into the theater that I was at. I went to this theater meeting, the open house, to the theater where I was admitted to for the Fringe, and they were lovely. It was Paradise Green.
Does anyone here hate cancel culture?
Huge church with like 15 theaters in it, and they have different shows, just like the Fringe Festival, like every hour on the hour from 9 in the morning until 1 in the morning. And my show was at a perfect time, which is 7 o'clock at night, every single night. And I'm at the meeting, and there's like about, 15 groups of us that are new to the festival. We're only there for the last week. And at the end of it, they give us an orientation, and they say, does anyone have any questions? And I raise my hand. I say, my grandma Betty, who is in heaven, told me to always speak up. And so I just arrived here from Israel, and I can already tell people were squirming a little bit because there's a lot of anti-Semitism, because the only place where people in the UK get their news is the BBC and the UN, which are known to be anti-Semitic and don't always report the facts. In fact, most of the time, they're very, very siding with the Palestinian cause, which Jews also are, but unfortunately, they make it seem very one-sided and that Israel's always at fault. However, some of them are, especially artists, are sensitive to both sides. And so I raise my hand, and this girl comes running over to me, and I say, by the way, I really need somebody to tech my show because I'm here alone. I just found out that I was in the Fringe exactly 48 hours ago, and I have no one to do my tech. It's pretty easy. It's 8 characters, 8 lighting cues, and about 10 or 12 sound and video cues. Please come up to me if you know anybody. Otherwise, I'm going to be doing it myself. And this girl comes up to me, this adorable girl named Bethany, and she says, I can do your show. Can you pay me this much? And I said, yes, I can. It was so kind of her. She would run every single night from the show one of the shows, she was doing a few shows. One of the shows that she and her theater company were doing, she would take off her costume, put on a black outfit because she was doing tech for my show, and get right into the seat and tech the crap out of my show and do an amazing job. And this is what most of my days look like. I would give out my flyers, ask them if
Have you ever saved a life in a 5-minute conversation?
And then there was this one day, beautiful sunshine, even though the weather was still extremely cold. And I met this lovely man and woman who told me they were Muslim, and we were dressed in very secular clothing. I held their hands, I hugged them. And all of a sudden, the conversation turned to Israel and Zionism.
It's time.
It's tapping your foot to get the rhythm, okay?
Palestine! Oh,
You can tap your foot, so that's the main thing.
We have
So
to
what is your
be.
favourite
We don't
animal?
have another dance toy.
A monkey, and what's your favourite animal?
Only our
A dog.
government.
Okay, so today these wonderful Kiwis, they're gonna
Right here, he tells me, I love Hamas. And then the conversation got really nasty. This is where I'm staying in Edinburgh. I had mostly good cosmic conversations today, but there were 2 in particular that were kind of scary, and I wanted to talk about it. There was a man who came up to me after I was speaking with his daughter for a while, and I was talking to her about my show and how it's about cancel culture and women, and how I believe that the future belongs to those who believe in something bigger than all of us, trying to get us all together to be in peace. And she's like, oh, that's so wonderful, inshallah. And she happened to be from a Muslim family, even though she is not herself particularly religious. And then her father came over to me, and he said the following. He said, I love Hamas, and I'm so proud of what they're doing. And I said, are you kidding? And he said, nope. And then he went on to rant about all these things that I have never heard of. He told me that just horrible things that apparently he believes, like, I don't want to repeat it, but just really sick things about Israel. And then he said, I don't like Zionists. I want them all dead. I love what Hamas is doing. He said, you obviously know there's a difference between a Zionist and a Jew. And I said, no, because we all pray for Israel, that it should exist and has a right to exist. And he said, you must watch CNN, which I thought was funny. And then he said some other really horrific things, like you're a propagandist and you don't really know what's going on there. And I said, actually, I was just there, and I have Muslim friends in the region and outside the region. And I just want to have peace, and I just want to see all of us get to live in democracy and happiness. And he said, no, I can't even argue with you. And I said, I don't want you to argue with me. He said, I mean, I can't even talk to you. And I said, why not? He said, where do you get your news from? And I said, I don't watch the news. He goes, I'm going to ask you again, where do you get your news from? I said, I don't watch the news. And he said, where do you get your news from? I said, I talk to human beings. And he said, I have to leave. I can't even stand in front of you one more second. And then his daughter hugged me and she said, I don't agree with everything my dad says. And it was a very challenging moment for me. And then I started to cry because I started to think, these are the kinds of people that I see on my Instagram feed, but I didn't realize are actually real. Like I thought some of it was just sensationalized. Never heard a human being in front of me say that they love Hamas and support Hamas. That was hard. And then I took a deep breath, and there was a gentleman who got into a conversation with me afterwards, who happened to be Scottish, and he was telling me about the work that he does. And we were having this great conversation about life and documentaries and things. And then I said, I have to share with you that I just had this talk with a man who supports Hamas, and I couldn't believe it. And he said, well, so do I. And this is a man who is white-skinned and probably born Christian, but not religious at all. And these are just two people that I spoke with today. The majority of the people I spoke with, I didn't really talk about their politics or what they believe in or don't believe in religiously, but we did talk about things like cancel culture and freedom of speech and democracy. And I just can't imagine them saying the same things. So I think on the whole, the majority of the people that I spoke to would support freedom of speech and potentially Israel's right to exist. But I'm definitely not in Israel anymore. And it's scary. It's scary to be a Jew outside the land of Israel. Because people tell you what's going on there. People that have never visited tell you what's going on there. And someone like me who just spent the last 3 weeks there and is trying desperately to connect people from all over the world through my show, it's a little painful to hear things like that. I just got to meet Rachel Poland Goldberg, whose son is still a hostage and trapped by Hamas. And I know human beings that are affected by Hamas's actions. And I've never met any of these Israelis that this man speaks of who do horrible things to Palestinians, but I'm not saying they don't exist. I just think it's so sad how he puts all Zionists in one box. He also said before 1948, there were no Jews in Palestine, and it was always called Palestine. And I thought, we're definitely reading different history books. Anyway, I got to go do my show, but this is part of my day. I thought I would share it with you.
I will tell you a memory about my grandparents.
The best part of Edinburgh are artists that come and have these incredible cosmic conversations in the street with total strangers, and people are off their phones for the most part and just walking around connecting and looking into each other's eyes, eating good food, drinking, and having a blast.
Hey, Dad, look who you sent me. Hey. Do you want to tell me why you're a superhero?
This is my new friend.
I love the show. I can feel if I'm in America. Highly recommend it.
Who I ran into?
Amazing show, and you're such a great actor, and I loved every character. Just felt it deep in my soul. Loved it. Very relatable. And the show was spot on with those characters, and I love the message.
I loved it. It was very liberating.
Her range, amazing music, amazing characters. It might just have restored a bit of my faith and kindness.
It's a brilliant show, and I love it.
Congrats on the show, it was fantastic.
Yeah, just magical to feel you hold the space for them and allow them to say what they need to say.
Such a fast-moving, funny,
with a fantastic musical, but actually there's some really true messages in it.
Absolutely fantastic performer, singing, and she's got such an intense message about humanity for everybody, and I cannot recommend her highly enough.
Resonated with me, you know.
It has been a treasure of the Edinburgh Festival.